sister moon, I seldom see you, seldom hear your tune, preoccupied with selfish misery.
Greetings, Uncle Travelling Matt here, and I'm reporting on day one of my Camino of St. Francis of Assisi through central Italy. It's actually day two now. I didn't make a video last night, and I'll explain why later, but I'm currently halfway up a mountain, as you can see. There we are. And as you can see, it's very pretty here, and yeah, it's been a really beautiful place all the way along. I guess that's why so many people come to Tuscany. But anyway, yesterday, so I woke up rather early actually. I went to bed very early and slept rather well and woke up about 7 o'clock. That said, I was still, there were 6 people in the dorm, and I was the second to last to get out. And I went out at 7, so I don't know what the hell the others were doing, because I don't think there's a lot to do in Florence at 6 o'clock in the morning. But anyway, and the reason why I woke up so early is I thought what I'd do is I'd go to Mass and then get going as early as possible. I thought there was a Mass at 7:30 and at 8:30, but there wasn't. There was only one at 8:30. So what I did is I had some breakfast, and whilst I was having some breakfast, I met my first other pilgrim, and so far my only other pilgrim. And he was a German chap from Bavaria, and I saw the guidebook, so I said, "Oh, are you doing the Francis of Assisi walk?" And he's going as far as Assisi, and so he didn't really speak much English, so we didn't have much of a conversation, but it gave it that Camino feel. Then I went to Mass, which it was in one of the side chapels of the cathedral, but really beautiful, and the acoustics was something else. Like, I could hear this strange kind of humming as I walked into the cathedral, and it's cavernous, it's massive, and it was actually caused by, 3 or 4 of the monks or priests singing up in the side chapel, and it was filling the whole space. It was unbelievable, and so I went to this Mass. It was a short one, but it was really nice, even though it was in Italian. I found it quite powerful, and of course I also got a look inside the famous cathedral and the very, very famous dome, which was one of the wonders of the world when it was built, and it's still pretty wonderful now. I have to say, Florence Cathedral is just something else, and both that and Pisa, if I was to say, well, what do I think they are? They're like early Roman basilicas transfigured, because they're the same shape as early Roman basilicas, but they've just done something else with them. So they're not Gothic at all. They're like Gothic is like early Roman basilicas transformed, perhaps, or reinvented, but they're like still essentially the early Roman basilica in shape and layout, but just transfigured into something incredible. So yeah, so went to the cathedral, then found my way to the Episcopalian, which is the Anglican church. It was built by the Americans in the middle of the 19th century, I think, for all the people who did the Great Tour. And of course I'd read a lot about Florence and all those novels about, ladies from the Great Tour in the, late Victorian and Edwardian era. And of course a lot of them would have worshipped there, so that was pretty good. Just trying to think of the author. Henry James writes a bit about that, and I think Edith Wharton does as well, and also E.M. Forster, Room with a View. So yeah, it produced this whole plethora of literature, and I found I tapped into that, of course, with the fact there were so many tourists everywhere, including a lot of Americans. So the Great Tour is far from dead. I mean, the Americans I met on the train the day before were they were doing Pisa, then Florence, and then going on to Rome. So yeah. The Great Tour is not dead. Anyway, that was that. So then I walked through the streets of Florence, called in a very nice medieval church. That's on the way. I'll have to look the name up at that one. But yeah, and then walked through to the Church of the Holy Cross. On the way, though, of course, I got my stamp at the Episcopalian church, and I actually grabbed 3 credentials, because I thought, well, they don't look very long, so I might need 2 for my pilgrimage. But I thought, what happens if I meet a pilgrim on the way who hasn't got one, who doesn't know how it works? Because on Camino everybody knows, but this is a different thing. And then I actually got another stamp at the tourist office, and then I went to the Church of the Holy Cross, which is the official start place. Got a stamp there, prayed in there. They let me in because I was going to pray, because I was a pilgrim for free. You normally have to pay about €7, so that was good. And got my stamp, and then I was going. And of course, my walk was quite an easy, flat one of just under 19 kilometres, except that it starts from the Church of the Holy Cross, and I'd actually already done 9,000 steps by that. So it turned out to be a really long day yesterday. I reckon I did around 25, 26 kilometres. But we got going, and it was along the river. I think it's the River Arno, and it was just a flat walk along the side of the river. There was people jogging and that, and I met my German pilgrim again, and he isn't walking that day. He was going to spend the day around Florence and then walk the next day. And I said, have you got your credential? And he said, no, he didn't even know what it was. So I said, here you are, have a credential, go to the Church of the Holy Cross and get it stamped. And he was really made up. So at least one of those extra credentials came in useful. So I don't feel so bad about taking a job lot now, because it made his day. And, you know, with there being the language barrier, that was a nice thing I could do. So anyway, I walked basically almost without stop to San Jacopo Alighieri. Probably pronouncing these wrong. And that's so it got out of Florence. I mean, it's not that big a city, really. I think it's about 350,000. So it's bigger than Stoke, but in terms of like imprint on the ground, I think it's smaller. And this San Jacopo, I like that because it's St. James San Jacopo. San Jacopo. So, you know, there was a little connection there with the Camino. And I went to a bar and had a sandwich there, and I read a little, and I wrote a poem. And I've been thinking about this on the way because I'm reading this amazing book, and I'm going to show it you later, but it's called Sacred Heart, and it's a novel about this girl in the 16th century who's forced into a nunnery, and against her will. And I don't know how it's going to happen, whether she'll accept it or whether, you know, she'll get out. I hope she gets out, obviously. I'm the rescue type. But yeah, the author is an English woman, but she lives half the time in Florence. And she went to Florence, had a midlife crisis, went to Florence, and then reinvented her life writing novels about feminist struggle in medieval Italy, which I think is great. I'd love to meet her. And then so I wrote this poem about a girl who's forced into a nunnery, but then how we all kind of, you know, get forced into prisons and compromise with our goals, compromise with life, and, you know, how we perhaps shouldn't, and we should fight it a bit more. And, you know, so I was thinking about like indentured labourers who, you know, spend their life in toil to send some money home, but actually, you know, give up on themselves. And of course, there's also my friend who's in a marriage where she's not happy but won't get out because she feels she can't, and things like that. And it's just why we should never ever give up on the absolute joy of life, because it's a wonderful thing, and I'm very, very privileged to be able to lead mine without many people telling me how to do it, and that's a blessing. But I think it's particularly cruel when people use God to restrict others, and it always seems to be women that get restricted. Anyway, preaching over, because part of my meditations were, well, okay, in what ways have I compromised my goals in life? And I think one of them I never really tried to get published, because I think deep down I'm scared of rejection. And a couple of others, and all of them, when I analyse them, it's because deep down there's a fear of perhaps rejection, a fear of failure. And I think fear controls so much of our lives, and me less than most people, but it's still there. Anyway, I moved on, and the path then went away from the river, and it went up through along some country lanes. A bit of a stiff climb, but good practice for today. And it went along these little lanes, and it was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And then back down to the river valley in the place called Compiobi. And so that was only a 3k sort of detour. And I thought, I wasn't intending to stop so soon after lunch, but then, do you know what? I saw this gelateria, and I thought, oh my God, I've got to stop there. It looks amazing. So I had a little cake and a Coke, and that was good because it gave me a bit of power. And then it was along the river again, through Elera, and then towards the city of Sieki. And And then after Sieki, and that was quite pretty by the river. And then after Sieki, I meant to have gone inland again, but couldn't be arsed. So I actually just walked along the main road. And of course, the reason why it tells you not to do that, there's no pavement. But I kept aside, and it was okay. And then, but by the time I got to Pontassieve, I was absolutely knackered. And I mean, it's literally one of those long towns. So when you get there, you're not there. And I was so knackered. Really, just the toll of all the walking had really taken on me. I'm not as fit as I should be, so I stopped in a little cafe and asked them for directions to my accommodation, which they gave me, and I had a coffee that powered me on the final half a k to my accommodation, which was Leonardo's rooms, up 2 flights of stairs, which I didn't appreciate, but it was very nice, and I was glad it wasn't a hostel, I'll be honest. And the lady was very friendly, and I just literally went to bed and lay comatose, not sleeping, just completely comatose, unable to move a muscle for about 2 or 3 hours. I ain't got a clue what time I arrived, and that's why I didn't do a video, because I literally had no energy. Like, I was literally exhausted, and I haven't felt that exhausted since, well, Camino. It's not as bad as my night in Roncesvalles. That was something else, but this was bad. And then I looped out at 8 o'clock and went to a pizzeria for a meal, and I had a so-so pizza. I mean, I can't eat meat at the moment, so yeah, it limits how good the food is, I guess. But yeah, and then had this pizza, and I went to bed, and I was in bed probably by 10, and woke up at well, meant to woke up at 8:30 this morning. I was actually in breakfast by about 10 to 9, so not too bad. Anyway, that's it from me, Uncle Travelling Matt, from halfway up a mountain on the way to the Paso del Consumer. Keep travelling.
Brother sun and sister moon, I now do see you, I can hear your tune, so much in love with all that I survey.